said, blessed are those that are pure in heart. Happy are those that are pure in heart, is what one translation says. And each of the verses that we've looked at is a different representation of a step that God has laid out for us, a step that Jesus has laid out for us to get healthy again in our lives. Now, we're not talking about just physical health. We're talking about spiritual, mental, emotional. We're talking about getting past all of the hurts, the hang-ups, the habits, the things in our lives that we carry with us all throughout life. That's what we're talking about, living a fully alive life. Life to the full as Jesus came to deliver us. Now, going backwards just a little bit, step one was when we talked about we had to realize that we are not God. The first step to getting healthy again is to say, look, I'm not God. I can't do this on my own. I need help. I need somebody else to help me in my life. That there is a God and I'm not it. That's step one. Step two was the hope step. Step two said that although that we're powerless to control those things in our lives and control the problems in our lives, the proof is that my life is unmanageable. That if I were God, I could work out all my problems on my own. But the truth of the matter is that I'm not God, and so I need His help. And what happens is we understand that God does care for us, and He does want to make a difference in our lives. And He has the power to handle all of our problems. We can't do that on our own. Step one, I can't do it on my own. Step two, God will help us in that. Step three that we looked at last week was the commitment step, which says it's not enough just to admit that life is unmanageable and that I have a tendency to do the wrong things over and over again, that I can't fix it, and that God can do something with it. I have to then trust Him with my problems. I have to let go of the things that I'm trying to manage, the things that I'm trying to control, and let God do what only God can do. I got to commit my life, commit my problems to God. That's the commitment step. So this morning we're looking at step 4, the next step in this journey. This is the house cleaning step. This is where we clean up what's going on in our lives. And I can give you this step in one sentence, and it's there in your outline. We're going to put it up on the screen. It says this: I must openly examine and confess my faults to myself and to God and to somebody that I trust. Then I have to, now that I've identified the faults and the failures and the problems and the hang-ups and the hurts in my life and call them what they are, I have to confess that to God. I have to confess that to myself. I need to confess that to somebody that I trust. And we're going to talk about all those things today. This has everything to do with cleaning up our past. Letting go of the guilt. Letting go and living with a guilt-free, clear conscience. Learning to live in a guilt-free way, the way that God intended us to live. I know a lot of people that carry guilt with them all throughout their life, and they just think that that's just our lot in life, is that we're supposed to just feel bad about the mistakes that we've made. We're supposed to just beat ourselves up all the time. That's not the way God designed it. That's not the way He wired us. All of us have those places in our lives. We have those things in our life that when we rewind, we do a mental rewind, we say, oh, I wish I could go back and do that again. I wish I could go back and make a different choice at that point in my life. We feel oftentimes very shameful about that. A lot of times we feel this sense of condemnation that, oh, I made that mistake, and I just feel like that dark cloud is just hanging over me all of the time. And what we find ourselves doing then is we try to outrun our past. We try to stay ahead of the game, and we try to get past our past just by pretending it's not there. And we think that we can outrun it. I don't know if you've ever tried to outrun your past like that, but it reminds me of a story I heard about. There was a convention that was taking place of Arkansas state troopers. And all these troopers, as they were coming together for this convention, were asked ahead of time to submit their best story, their best excuse that they ever got for people when they give them a ticket. Can you imagine what some of those things were? So they all pulled in and sent in their best excuses. Oh, you got to hear this one. Oh, you got to hear this one. The winning entry was submitted by a trooper who clocked a semi-truck going down the interstate, speeding going down the interstate. So the trooper pulls in behind this truck and he turns his lights on, but the truck just keeps going. And this trooper gets right up to his bumper. He's right on his tail. The lights are going. He's on his tail, and the guy just goes even faster. And he's got a siren going too, and the lights, and he's right up on his tail, and he sees the guy, he makes eye contact with him. The guy just floors it and keeps going. Finally, the truck runs out of gas. The truck pulls over to the side of the road and rolls to a stop. And the trooper gets out and he walks up to the trucker's window, and the driver rolls down his window, and the trooper says, "Hey, didn't you see my lights back there?" He said, "Yes, sir, I did." "Didn't you notice me right on your bumper the whole time?" "Yes, sir, I did." Didn't you hear my siren going all those miles ago? "All the time I've been following you." The trucker said, "Yes, sir, I did." The trooper said, "Well, why didn't you pull over after seeing that, and hearing that, observing all that?" The trucker said, "Well, to be honest with you, sir, about 2 years ago, my wife ran off with an Arkansas State Trooper, and I just thought you were trying to bring her back." We try to outrun things in our lives. We have guilt that we try to get rid of, and it follows us around like a bad smell that just doesn't go away. And you're just like, I can't get past this. You get rid of that by taking step 4 that we're going to look at today. This is your key to relief. Listen to this, what the psalmist wrote. Psalm 32, verse 1 and 2. How would you like to live like this? What happiness for those whose guilt has been forgiven. What release for those who have confessed their sin and God has cleared their record. Wouldn't you like to live like that? What a way to live, where your guilt has been forgiven. Your record has been wiped clean. Wouldn't that be an unbelievably wonderful way to live your life? Well, you can live that way, but I want us to answer a couple questions of why this is so important. Why deal with our guilt? Why not just blow it off? Why not just try to outrun it? Why not just ignore it? Why should we even discuss this topic? Well, there's all kinds of reasons. I want to give you a couple. You can write them down on your outline. Why I think this is so important. Number one is I think it helps us to deal with our confidence. If we deal with our guilt, we'll gain confidence. Because here's what I found. Fear and confidence cannot exist at the same time in the same person. You cannot be both fearful and confident at the same time. The guilt is like the twin sister to fear. So when you have guilt in your life, you live a life of fear. They're kind of the same thing. Guilt is the fear that I'm going to get caught. Guilt is the fear that I'm going to be found out, that somebody's going to find out what happened in my life. It's the fear that people will realize that I'm not all that I'm cracked up to be. I'm not all that I put on in front of everybody else. It's the fear that once they learn about my secrets, they will no longer accept me. They will reject me. That's what guilt does. And people carry this guilt around with mistakes and decisions and things that they've done in the past. And they think, if anybody finds out about this, I'm afraid of what they're going to do. And so it wreaks havoc on our confidence level. So fear and guilt are just closely tied together, and they become like an acid to our confidence. It just pours over our confidence, and it erodes it. It just destroys it a little bit at a time. And what happens is, at the end, that our confidence is just gone. It just melts away. But if we deal with our guilt, it will give us confidence. That's one reason. Here's another reason. Write this down. If we deal with our guilt, our relationships will improve. You know, one of our core values here is in our DNA of nurturing relationships, is understanding how do we build better relationships? How do we deal in good relationships? If we deal with our guilt, our relationships will get better. Have you ever noticed, maybe you're the kind of person that can only go so far in a relationship? I know people like this all the time. You get so close to a person, and you allow another person to get so close to you, and then all of a sudden you put on the brakes, and something happens. And you may not be doing this consciously, but it happens over and over again. And what happens is you're stiff-arming people. Once they start getting close, once they start getting intimate, once they start finding out more about you, that you start pushing them away. There's this knee-jerk reaction. And you say, maybe it comes out in exploding in anger. Maybe it comes out in some other way, but they say, well, why are you acting this way? It's because it's being driven by fear. Your guilt is driving them away. Or maybe you're a person that wounds people over and over and over again. And again, you're not even maybe doing this consciously. But this comes out where you're hurting other people. You're being mean-spirited to other people. You're being sarcastic or hurtful in your attitude or your behavior. You know why you do that? Because hurting people hurt other people. You heard that expression? This is important. This is why this is so important. When you're hurt, what happens is you end up hurting other people. When you're carrying around that guilt, it will often come out in toxic kind of ways in other relationships. Hurting people hurt people. So if there's somebody in your life that you see that is hurting people over and over and over and over again, here's one thing you can know about them. They're hurting on the inside. They're hurting on the inside. We do that to keep people away from us. We don't want them to get too close to us. So we put up, it's a defense mechanism. And what happens is our relationships get destroyed. But if we would deal with our guilt, if we will do the hard work and deal with the guilt, our relationships will improve. It's another benefit of what we're going to talk about today. Here's another thing. If we deal with our guilt, we'll have a better future. Because what guilt does is it keeps us trapped in our past. Everything is identified by our past. Decisions that we made, relationships that went bad, things that happened to us. Last week we talked about living life in such a way that you're flying down the highway of life, and if all the time you're only looking in the rearview mirror, you're going to crash. It's a sure way to lead to disaster. Now, of course, you have to glance in the back, and it's the same thing in our lives. You have to look backwards every once in a while in order to know where you are and to gauge where you're going and to make sure that you don't want to repeat bad mistakes. But you don't want to stare at the past. You don't want to obsess over the past. What guilt does is it just replays our past over and over and over again. And it forces us to stay confined in our past. It's like focusing us only on the rearview mirror in our life and forgetting that there's a front windshield. So the thing about guilt is that it cannot change our past. Just like worry cannot change our future. Guilt does not change our past. That's why this is an important step. Now, step number 4 is a scary step. It's a gutsy step. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. This is the step that separates the talkers from the doers. This is the step that separates people who says, I'm going to get on with my life, versus people that just say, I'm thinking about it. Someday I ought to. This separates those people from the people that say, I'm going to become well. I'm going to get over my past. I'm going to bury my guilt. The thing about guilt is you can't bury your guilt while you're still keeping it alive. Anybody know the name Larry Laprise? You know who Larry Laprise is? He died several years ago. Larry Laprise is from Detroit. He was the guy that was credited with coming up and writing the best-known song ever, the Hokey Pokey. Remember that song? The Hokey Pokey? Put your right foot in, put your left foot out, right foot, shake it all about. Yeah, apparently they had a hard time burying him because they would put his right arm in and the casket, and then his right arm would come out. You can't bury something that's still alive. You can't bury something that won't be dead. You have to bury your guilt. So let's look at the question, why we want to talk about this morning. How are we going to remove guilt? If that's why we want to do it, how are we going to do it? You say, I have this guilt, I have this something that I'm carrying in my past, and it's deeply entrenched in my life. It's got a firm grip on my mind. How do I remove that? How do I get healthy again? How do I take that cancer out of my life? Well, here I'm going to give you some ideas. Number 1 is you have to clean out your closet. You've heard that idea of skeletons in your closet. You got to clean out your closet. Those closets in your mind, those closets in your heart, those places that you locked away some deep, dark secrets. You've got to clean that out. Places where you shut the door and you locked it and you sealed it up and you don't want anybody else snooping around in it. You don't want any of those skeletons to come tumbling out. You don't want your past to be revealed in any way. So what this step means is that you take a moral inventory of your life. You look at those areas in your life that are suspect, those areas that maybe you've locked away, those areas that need to be cleaned out. And so this step is all about taking some time, building time into your life, set it aside to do a moral inventory of your moral closet. The Bible tells us that we need to examine ourselves. Lamentations tells us, let's examine our ways. And I like what the psalmist wrote, this prayer. And I would offer this prayer to you as a suggestion for you to build it into the fabric of your everyday life. Psalm 139 is a great prayer. It says, search me, O God. Scan my life, God. Know my heart. Know really what's going on. Look inside. Look in all the places where all the skeletons are. Test my thoughts. And point out anything that you see that makes you sad. God, if there's anything in my life that you look at that and you say, oh, man, it breaks my heart that you're still harboring that. It breaks my heart that you think that way. It breaks my heart that you act that way. God, if there's anything in my life that reflects that poorly on you, would you point them out to me? That's what the psalmist was saying. I want to give you the key to any locked door in my life, in my mind, in my heart. And I want you to go in and I want you to clean it out. And I want you to say, oh, this has to go. Oh, this has to go. That's what he's saying. My question for you is, would you be willing to pray this prayer? You want to get past your past? You've got to be willing to pray prayers like this. You've got to be willing to let God into your heart and to say, God, do what only you can do. Come in and clean house. You got stuff hanging in your moral closet. Now let's suppose you have an attitude section. Maybe in your closet, right now, if you went at home, you have your dress clothes, you have your play clothes, you have your summer clothes, you have your shoes, you have your this, you have all your matching. All right, so let's go to your moral closet. Let's say you have an attitude section there. And in this attitude, you say, well, what's hanging in the attitude section of your closet that needs to be cleaned out? Do you have a complaining attitude? Maybe you have a critical attitude that needs to be cleaned out. Maybe there's this ungrateful attitude. What would be in that section in your closet? Just think this through in your own life. What would be in that section for you to say, you know what, it's time that I deal with this? You take this thing off the rack and say, I got to get rid of this. This isn't fit for me anymore. I got to get this out of here. Let's say maybe you go to the relationship section of your closet. And maybe you look in that relationship section, you pull out the drawers and you see bitterness inside of one of the drawers, or you see revenge in another drawer, or you see this unwillingness to forgive in another drawer, and you say, you know what, I can't leave these things in here. They're just messing up my life. They're just messing up. They're clogging up what is useful space for other good things. We can spend all day cleaning out our closet, and really that's the point. Is to spend all of our lives, to spend our days going through that. What about the integrity part of your closet? What's hanging in there that you no longer want cluttering up your life? And you look in there and you ask yourself, am I the same person day in and day out, publicly, privately? Am I the same person with everybody that I deal with, whether I'm with this crowd of friends or this crowd of friends or this crowd of friends? Am I the same person? Is what you see what you get in my life? What about the priority section of your life? Maybe there was a time when God was first place, and God was first and foremost. As soon as you open up the door of your closet, he was right there. But now he's been tucked away someplace, and you got to really go sifting through just to even find a remnant of them. And maybe you say, I've got to fix that in my moral closet. That ain't right. I can't go on living that way. Your priorities need to be reordered, and those things that are now in the dark parts of your closet need to be brought out front and center. Take a moral inventory of your closet. Clean out your closet. Number 2, here's the step to take, is to stop the blame, deny, avoid game. It's a cycle that we go through. We blame, we deny, we avoid. We blame, we deny, we avoid. It's like this vicious, ugly merry-go-round, a psychotic merry-go-round that goes round and round and round. And we wonder why our lives are feeling dizzy and out of control, and we just feel spinning. We feel like we're stuck, and we're just in this Groundhog Day loop that we just can't get out of. It's because we won't stop playing this game. We blame, we deny, we avoid. We blame, we deny, we avoid. It's not my fault, it's your fault. Oh, sure, there might be some issues in my life, but I don't think they're my issues. Oh, I don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about that later. And we do that over and over and over. This is about becoming radically honest and saying, you know what? Maybe I'm part of the problem. There are some painful things, for sure. Don't misunderstand. There are painful things in our lives that we didn't bring on ourselves. Let's just agree upon that. But let's go beyond that. Let's get real gut level honest here to say there are a lot of things that happen in our life, a lot of problems, a lot of pain that are fully our fault, that we bring in because of decisions that we make, attitudes that we have, ways that we treat other people. And so what happens is I see people do this. We play these games like, well, if I just change jobs, that will take care of it. Things will get better. If I just change cities, things will get better. If I just change relationships and I sever ties with these people, build relationships with a new set of friends, things will get better. The problem is, and here's what I want you to get gut level honest about. The problem is, those problems don't go away in those scenarios, because you know what the common denominator is in all of those jobs and all of those cities and all those relationships? It's you. It's me. We're that common denominator. And until we accept responsibility for our faults and quit rationalizing and quit blaming and quit avoiding and quit denying, we will not get healthy again. There was another man traveling at a high rate of speed down a highway. He's pulled over by a policeman. Rolls down his window and he asks, "Hey, what's the trouble, officer?" The policeman said, "I caught you going 85 in a 65-mile-an-hour zone." The man said, "That's impossible. I never speed. Couldn't have been me. I couldn't have done that. I'm always very cautious. I always go the speed limit." And he asked his wife, "Don't I, honey? Don't I always go the speed limit?" The policeman pokes his head in the window and says, "Well, what about it, ma'am?" The wife says, "He always speeds. He has a lead foot." If we were flying back there, in fact, I was terrified. I was going to try to flag you down myself. The man just glares at his wife. Are you kidding me? Then he notices the policeman writing out a second ticket. He says, what are you doing?" "Well, I noticed, sir, you didn't have your seatbelt on, so I'm citing you for that as well." The man starts protesting. "Are you kidding me? I always wear my seatbelt. In fact, I never start the car unless I have the seatbelt on. I must have unconsciously buckled it while you were walking up. Tell him, honey, I always wear my seatbelt, right?" The policeman leans his head in the window and says, "Well, what about it, ma'am?" And the lady says, "He never wears a seatbelt. I bet that seatbelt has never been used the whole time we've owned this car. In fact, there's probably cobwebs like hanging off of that thing." The policeman gives the guy both tickets. The man is infuriated. He tears them up into little pieces. He throws them at his wife, starts yelling at her, berating her right in front. The policeman leans his head in the window and asks, "Does he always treat you like that?" And the wife says, "Only when he's drunk." Now, the point of the story is this. What are you being dishonest about? But you're really guilty. What is it that you're saying? "That's not my problem. I don't treat people that way. I don't think that way. I don't have that kind of problem." What is it in your life that you're saying, "I don't do that, I don't do that"? But if we were to ask other people, they'd say, "You do that all the time." What are you being dishonest about that you really are guilty about? You make a moral inventory. You make a list and you say, "Yeah, that's the truth about me. Listen, I am that way." No more game playing, no more hiding it, no more denying it. That's the truth about me. That's the second part. Now here's the third part. Then you have to let God do that deep cleaning. Okay, that's the third step here. Let God do deep cleaning in your life. There's a great verse in the New Testament. It's a powerful verse. It's a very personal verse for me, because I remember when I was baptized as a kid, I remember reciting this verse in front of my church family, because it was something that had just connected with me, and all of these years later it is still connected with me. And it's in 1 John 1:9, and I like the King James version of it, because when I grew up we had the King James version is what I was drilled into, and so it still sticks in my head. 1 John 1:9 says that if we confess our sins, He is faithful and He is just, and He will forgive us our sins, and He will cleanse us from all unrighteousness. That's a great verse to tuck in your memory bank. The Good News version of that translation says, if we freely admit that we have sinned, we find God utterly reliable. I like that. He forgives our sin. He makes us thoroughly clean from all that is evil. But I want you to notice that the sequence in that verse. If we freely tell God, that's the first part, "God, this is the truth about me. I know that I can't even hide from you, so I'm not going to hide anymore. I'm not going to pretend anymore. I know that you know it, and I know that you know that I know it, so let's just pretend that, let's just call it what it is. I want to say to you, God, that I know this, I recognize this, I see this in me." And then look what it says. Because God is utterly reliable, look what He does. He forgives your sin, and He makes you entirely clean. This is the cleaning verse of the Bible. This is what separates us from the hurts and the hang-ups and the habits in our lives. and the guilt that we carry with us. This is the scissors that cuts that. If we will get honest with God, He is faithful, He is just, He is thoroughly, utterly reliable. And He will forgive us our sins, and He will cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Now, does He do that because we've earned it? Because we said the magic words? No. Does He do this because we deserve it? No. He does this because this is who God is. This is who God is. This is something that I want you to learn about, the very nature of God, this God that we read about, this God that we sing about, this God that we celebrate, that we pattern our lives after, that we're trying to follow, all of us together, that He is utterly reliable. He never breaks His promise. He never goes back on His word. He never fails to come through on something that He said He would do. This is His nature. He cannot be deterred from that. And the whole basis of forgiveness is found in the reliability of God's promise. And I read a story about a lady who was dying of AIDS, that she had contracted through just living a promiscuous lifestyle. So she asked her pastor to come. Probably wasn't even her pastor. It was probably just a pastor, somebody that she somehow got connected to, but nonetheless, she asked this pastor to come by and visit her, and she said, when he comes in and sits down in her little dingy, dinky little apartment, she just says, I am so lost. She said, I've ruined my life. I've ruined the lives of the people all around me, and I know that I'm headed for hell. There's no hope for somebody like me. There's no hope that God would do something and intervene in somebody's life like mine. And the pastor's sitting there listening to her pour out her heart. And as he's listening, he's scanning around the room. And on the table in this little dingy apartment, he spots a picture of this beautiful young woman sitting on the woman's dresser. And he says, who is that picture? And she brightens up for a second. She said, oh, that's the one beautiful thing in my life. That's my daughter. That's a picture of my daughter. And the pastor said, let me ask you something about your daughter and you as a mother. Would you help her if she were in trouble no matter what? No matter how many mistakes that she made, no matter how many errors she made, no matter how many wrong choices, if she asked you for forgiveness, would you love her no matter what? The woman says, of course I would. Why would you even ask that of me? It's my daughter. I love her. Why would you even ask the question? He says, because I want you to understand that God has a picture on His dresser too. It's a picture of you. And He will forgive you no matter what you've done or where you've gone or what you've gone through or what you've endured and the decisions that you've made and the mistakes that you've made. Why? Because He is utterly reliable, and He says, that's what I do. And if we confess our sins, He is faithful, He is just, He is utterly reliable to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us and make us entirely clean from all that is evil. Look at what God says to you in Isaiah 1. This is God speaking to you, to me. No matter how deep the stain of your sin is, I can take it out. And I can make it clean as freshly fallen snow. You say, God, how can you do that? How can you take this dirt in my life? I mean, it is ingrained, it is embedded, it has been driven in, it has become so woven into the fabric of who I am. How could you take that out? He says, I can reach in and I can take that out, and I can make you clean like freshly fallen snow. You say, God, but look at my list. I can make you clean because I'm utterly reliable. Here's the fourth thing. Write this down. You need to tell a Christian friend. When you're going through this process and you're identifying your guilt and you've got these things in your life, these faults and these failures, hurts and habits and hang-ups, all these things that we're talking about, at some point you need to, after you've talked to God about it, you need to talk to a trusted Christian friend. And I want to quantify this and qualify this. The Bible teaches us that we are to confess our sins to one another in order that we may be healed. That's what James wrote. Confess your sins to other people in order that you may be healed. So you say, well, why do I have to drag somebody else into this? Isn't it good enough that I talk to God about it? Can't I just write it down and secretly burn it in a fire or something like that just between me and God? Can't I just think about it and pray about it? No. Why do I need to tell somebody else? Because God says right here in this verse in James that revealing your feelings is the beginning of healing. When you reveal it, you open up and you unlock your heart to somebody else, that's the beginning of healing. That's where you find healing. If you don't do that, the more you hide it, the bigger it gets. It grows like a cancer in our lives. If you just say, I'm just going to pretend it's not there, I'm just going to ignore it. And the amazing thing, though, is that when you risk being honest with another person, all of a sudden this new freedom comes into your life. Now listen, you don't need to have more than one person. You need to have somebody in your life like that. You don't need to have a gazillion people like that. But my question is there somebody in your life with whom you can be totally honest and just say, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm struggling with. This is what I'm carrying around with me. Because I want you to hear, this is the kind of church that we're trying to be. This is the kind of group that we need to be for one another. This is what we need to be for other people who are hurting and dealing with those habits and hang-ups. Now, you don't just indiscriminately broadcast your sin. You need somebody who can say to you, you're right, that is a sin. You're right, that is a problem. You're right, you do need to clean that up. And you're right, you can find forgiveness. And you can find freedom through Christ. You need somebody that will speak truth in love to you that way. Somebody to do that, not in a finger-wagging way, but in a compassionate, tender-hearted, open way. Devoted followers of Jesus have that. People that dance around and play on that, they skate dangerously close. That's why I'm telling you, find a trusted, God-honoring, Christ-following, fully devoted follower of Jesus. That's who you confess. That's who you open up to, because those are the people that can do that for you, can be compassionate with you. Here's the last thing. Number 5 is to accept God's forgiveness and to forgive myself. You want to get past the guilt, you have to accept God's forgiveness, and you also have to forgive yourself. This is a step I don't want you to miss. This is a step for everybody. I mean, all these steps are for everybody. I mean, this is not just for sinners. This is for everybody. This is for people in the church, outside the church. This is for pastors. This is for leaders. This is for everybody. We all need this step. Why? Because we're all in the same boat. There's this pesky little verse in Romans 3:23 that says, all have sinned. All have fallen short of the glory of God. Last time I checked the definition of the word all, it pretty much means all. Everybody. We all need this. But here's the good news. God forgives all. He forgives us instantly. He forgives us freely. He forgives us completely. Why? Because He is utterly reliable. He is utterly reliable. He will do what He said He will do. He frees us from our past. That's what forgiveness does. We have a chance of a brand new start. There was a guy that went to a former employer, somebody that he had worked with years before, but had been fired 3 years prior to that. And he asked his boss for his old job back. Now, it might have just been a hunch, but the foreman that he came to looked at the guy's eyes, and for whatever reason, he said, all right, I'm going to give you 2 weeks of probation to come on back. I'm going to give you a 2-week chance. You're on probation for 2 weeks, you come on back. So the guy worked hard for 2 weeks. He busted himself for 2 weeks. And then the foreman came to him and he says, okay, I'm going to extend your probationary period to 6 months now. You've shown yourself. After 6 months, the guy had still done a fantastic job. The foreman then approaches the guy and he says, you know what, I just have to ask, you are a different man than you were 3 years ago. You're a different man than the guy that I fired 3 years ago. What has changed in your life? And the guy just opened up and told his story. And the story went something like this. He said, during my college years, I had pledged at a fraternity. And part of the pledge process was that I got drunk They put me behind the wheel of a car, and I was told to drive full speed down this road. And at the end of the road there were these other guys that were pledging into the fraternity who were taking their initiation, and they were standing right in the middle of the road. And so my job was just to scare them, just to really, put the love of God and the fear of God in them. And these guys were all standing there, but they told me, said, head full on toward him, and in the last minute swerve away. So he goes, I was so drunk that when I swerved out of the way, I hit and killed one of my best friends. It devastated me. He said, I dropped out of college. I went from job to job to job, which is when I was here the last time. I had many jobs after this one. My marriage failed. I was ready to kill myself. I was at the bottom. But a few months ago, a lady came to my door, knocked on my door, and I could see she looked a little bit familiar, and I realized who she was as she introduced herself as the mother of the boy that I had killed. And she told me that for 3 years after the death of her son, she had prayed that my life would be a hell on earth, that my pain would just be misery upon misery upon misery. But then she told me that about 2 weeks ago, before she came to my house, she had committed her life to Christ. And for 2 weeks, she's been on a quest to find me. She drove 200 miles to my doorstep to tell me face to face that she forgave me. And I want you to listen to what this man told this foreman. He said, in her face, I finally found permission to become the kind of person that I could never have been had I never driven drunk. That's what forgiveness does. It's a chance to be who God always planned us to be. So I challenge you this morning to look into the face and the forgiveness of Jesus. Imagine him just taking you by your cheeks to say, forgive you, okay? And you will discover permission to become the woman or the man that God always intended for you to be. Your guilt is removed. You have the chance now to live a brand new life. Brand new life is yours.